What was supposed to be a celebratory moment for American soccer quickly turned into a geopolitical discussion. The White House had invited the Major League Soccer champions, Inter Miami CF, to Washington to celebrate their title victory. The event included some of the most recognizable figures in global soccer, including Argentine superstar Lionel Messi, who has helped transform the popularity of the sport in the United States since joining Inter Miami in 2023. During the ceremony, President Donald Trump welcomed the team and praised Messi's achievements, calling him one of the greatest players in the world. Messi and several teammates stood behind the president as he addressed reporters and guests gathered in the East Room of the White House. The atmosphere at first resembled a typical championship celebration often held for sports teams that win major titles in the United States. However, the tone of the event began to shift when Trump started discussing global politics and ongoing military operations. Instead of focusing entirely on the soccer team's achievement, the president referenced the ongoing military conflict involving the United States and Iran. According to reports, Trump said American forces were making significant progress and that the situation was advancing faster than many analysts expected. The unexpected shift from sports celebration to global politics surprised many observers watching the event. Players stood quietly behind the president as he moved between topics ranging from war in the Middle East to future U.S. foreign policy priorities. The moment created a surreal scene. One of the world's most famous athletes standing in the White House while the president discussed international conflict and strategic decisions affecting global geopolitics. One of the central themes of Trump's remarks during the event was the ongoing conflict involving Iran. The president stated that the United States military, working alongside allies, was actively engaged in operations aimed at weakening Iran's military capabilities. According to Trump, the mission was progressing successfully and ahead of schedule. The remarks came at a time when tensions in the Middle East were already high. Trump emphasized that defeating the threat posed by Iran was currently the top priority for the United States government. In his view, stabilizing the situation in the region was essential before Washington could focus on other international issues. What made the moment unusual was the context in which these comments were delivered. Instead of being announced during a formal press conference or military briefing, the statements were made during a ceremony intended to honor a soccer team. While presidents often use public appearances to discuss national policy, mixing sports celebration with war commentary created a striking contrast. On one side of the stage stood Lionel Messi and several Inter Miami players, representing global sports and entertainment. On the other side stood the president discussing military operations and geopolitical strategy. Observers noted that this moment illustrated how intertwined politics and media spectacle have become in modern politics. In today's media environment, major announcements and policy signals can occur in almost any setting, even during events that initially appear unrelated to government affairs. Perhaps the most widely discussed part of Trump's speech came when he shifted from the Middle East to the Caribbean. After discussing the situation with Iran, the president suggested that Cuba could eventually become a focus of U.S. foreign policy. Trump reportedly stated that the United States wanted to finish dealing with the situation involving Iran first. After that, he suggested attention could turn toward Cuba. He described it as something that would happen eventually, saying it would be just a question of time. He also claimed that Cuba was eager to negotiate with the United States and that the Cuban government might be willing to make a deal with Washington. According to Trump, the economic pressure and internal struggles facing the island nation could push its leadership toward negotiations. The comments quickly attracted attention from journalists and political analysts because they appeared to signal a possible future shift in American policy toward Cuba. However, Trump did not announce any concrete actions or plans. Instead, his remarks were more suggestive than definitive. He implied that once the administration finishes dealing with the current international crisis involving Iran, Washington may revisit its strategy toward the Cuban government. To understand why Trump's comments attracted so much attention, it is important to consider the long history between the United States and Cuba. Relations between the two countries have been tense for decades. Since the early 1960s, the United States has maintained a sweeping economic embargo against the island nation following the Cuban Revolution and the rise of a communist government aligned with the Soviet Union. Over the years, different American administrations have taken different approaches to Cuba. Some attempted diplomatic engagement, while others favored strict economic pressure and political isolation. Trump's earlier presidency was known for reversing several policies that had attempted to normalize relations with Cuba. His administration restored restrictions on travel, tightened economic sanctions, and increased pressure on the Cuban government. Because of this history, any suggestion that the United States might shift its focus toward Cuba immediately raises questions about what type of policy approach might follow. Would Washington pursue diplomatic negotiations, increase sanctions, or support political changes within the country? Trump's comments did not answer these questions directly. However, by mentioning Cuba in the same speech where he discussed military operations against Iran, he signaled that the island nation remains part of the broader strategic thinking of his administration. Another important detail in Trump's remarks involved the possible role of the U.S. Secretary of State. During his comments, Trump suggested that Secretary of State Marco Rubio could play a major role in addressing the situation with Cuba in the future. Rubio, a Cuban-American politician from Florida, has long been one of the most outspoken critics of the Cuban government in American politics. His family fled Cuba after the revolution, and his political career has frequently included strong support for policies aimed at pressuring the Cuban regime. Because of this background, Rubio is often seen as a key figure in shaping U.S. policy toward Cuba. Trump's suggestion that Rubio might handle negotiations or diplomatic efforts with Havana was therefore not surprising to many analysts. Some observers believe Rubio could push for reforms inside Cuba in exchange for easing certain economic sanctions. Others believe he may favor maintaining strict pressure on the Cuban government until major political changes occur. Regardless of the specific strategy, Rubio's involvement would likely signal that the issue of Cuba could become a major topic in U.S. foreign policy debates, if the administration decides to prioritize it in the future. Another reason Trump's comments drew attention is the difficult economic situation currently facing Cuba. In recent years, the country has struggled with severe shortages of fuel, electricity, and basic goods. Economic problems have been worsened by declining support from Venezuela, which for years supplied the island with subsidized oil. Without that reliable supply of energy, Cuba has experienced blackouts and growing economic instability. Food shortages and inflation have also created frustration among many citizens. Trump referenced this situation when he suggested that the Cuban government might soon be forced to negotiate with the United States. According to the president, the economic difficulties facing the island could weaken the government's position and make a deal more likely. However, analysts caution that predicting the collapse of governments is extremely difficult. Cuba has faced economic crises before and managed to maintain political stability despite significant hardships. Still, the country's economic struggles remain an important factor shaping discussions about its future and about the possibility of changes in its relationship with the United States. Despite the dramatic headlines circulating online, it is important to clarify what Trump did not actually say during the event. He did not declare war on Cuba. He did not announce a military plan targeting the island, and he did not outline any specific timeline for policy changes. Instead, his comments were more speculative. Trump suggested that after dealing with Iran, the United States might eventually shift its attention to Cuba. But this statement was framed more as a political observation rather than an official policy announcement. In international politics, leaders often use language that signals intentions without committing to specific actions. Such remarks can influence diplomatic conversations, but they do not necessarily represent immediate decisions. This distinction is important because headlines on social media sometimes exaggerate the meaning of political statements. While Trump clearly hinted that Cuba could become a future focus of U.S. policy, the situation remains uncertain and no concrete measures have been announced. Another aspect that made the event widely discussed online was the unusual presence of Lionel Messi during the speech. Messi is known for avoiding political controversy and rarely commenting on international affairs. During the ceremony, the Argentine superstar stood behind the president, while Trump spoke about military operations and international policy. For many viewers, the image of one of the world's greatest athletes standing quietly during a geopolitical discussion created a surreal moment. Messi himself did not speak about politics during the event. Instead, the focus of his appearance was the team's MLS championship victory and his role in raising the profile of soccer in the United States. The Inter Miami players also presented Trump with gifts, including a special jersey bearing the number 47, referencing Trump's presidential term. While the event was meant to celebrate sports, the political remarks ensured that the visit would be remembered for much more than just soccer. After the event, clips of Trump's comments quickly spread across television networks and social media platforms. News outlets highlighted the unusual combination of sports celebration and geopolitical discussion. Some commentators focused on Trump's suggestion that Cuba might soon be ready to negotiate with the United States. Others focused on his remarks about the war with Iran and how they reflected the administration's current priorities. The event also sparked debate online, where many users discussed the unusual visual of Lionel Messi standing behind the president, while global political issues were being discussed. For journalists and analysts, the moment illustrated how modern political communication works. In an era dominated by viral clips and social media, even brief comments made during ceremonial events can quickly become global news stories. In the broader context of international politics, Trump's remarks highlight how interconnected global issues can be. The United States currently faces multiple foreign policy challenges at the same time. The conflict involving Iran represents one of the most serious geopolitical crises in the Middle East in recent years. At the same time, relations with countries in the Western Hemisphere, including Cuba and Venezuela, remain complicated and politically sensitive. When Trump suggested that Cuba could become a future focus after the situation with Iran is resolved, he was essentially outlining a sequence of priorities in American foreign policy. Whether those priorities will actually lead to new diplomatic negotiations, increased sanctions, or other actions remains uncertain. But the remarks indicate that the administration is already thinking about the next phase of its international strategy. For now, the comments serve as a reminder that even a celebration of a soccer championship at the White House can become a platform for discussing some of the most important geopolitical questions facing the world today.